Hi, it's Luna. Welcome to day 13 of Moth Eaten Reel's 31 Days of Horror 2024. Today we'll be diving into the eerie, gothic, feminist world of The Invitation 2022. Let's talk about it. So we're set up with a scene that looks kind of like something out of Eddie Murphy's Haunted Mansion, you know? We've got then our gothic heroine who is in her diaphanous flowing white silks running from something dark and terrifying. And then the solution to this is that she takes a bust for the extra weight and then jumps off the banisters to hang herself from whatever this thing is and says it ends with me. We then open in on to our real protagonist of the film, our real heroine, Evie, who is a freelance artist, which means that she's mostly doing catering jobs in New York to afford her apartment. I don't know. In the media, they always have the most beautiful apartments, and I'm like, how do you afford this? But it's fine. We're in movie land. It's okay. We meet her while she is doing catering for a specific event for some kind of ancestry DNA family tree website that's celebrating its 10th anniversary. We get to see her experience some fun sexual harassment and joke about it with her co-worker, because how else do you get through these things? Interestingly, to note immediately that her co-worker and she is also black, so there's then an interesting line of how they're treated like property, and immediately I'm thinking that that's a little bit like on the nose, but that is a good thing. I feel like it's the movie going straight in there with like a mission statement on the social commentary that it wants to make. Their boss is then a tosser. He's nearby and he says like, you know, most girls would be very grateful for this job. Tosser and her friend Grace, her best friend Grace, it's good to see that they have a lively kind of social media relationship. So they're always texting and chatting. She's not alone, although she is an orphan, which we find out during this scene at the beginning. I do want to say, I like that there's just a lot of good set design in the room. I don't think that the scene could be too long at all, maybe like 5 minutes, but it establishes a lot about her immediate life and who she is as a person. Obviously artist, not that that's then a personality trait, but I feel specifically that the way that it's set up, that she does her ceramics. I don't know art, it's something that she says later when she's like, it's ceramics actually, and I'm like, good for her, good for that passion. And she's listening to a voicemail lying back on her bed in her artist's overalls from her mother, and the fact that this voicemail is from a year ago immediately lets us in on the fact that it's because she's not going to hear her mother's voice anymore ever again. The plot kicks off for Evie when she gets home and then decides to take a test for this DNA family tree website thing and finds a relative in the form of a cousin who just so happens to be visiting New York at that time, an English aristocrat, Oliver. And that information also sets us up for why she might actually be seeking other family. The fact that then she is recently orphaned, has no other relatives, spurs her on to meet this distant cousin Oliver. So they meet up in a restaurant place that, trivia, was actually filmed in Hungary. She has a really good friend on her side, you know, it's 2022, but she's like, don't meet strangers on the internet. Specifically, I think that it's something good to have in there early on again, that like the two of them are black, and like it's just kind of like creating then these like social awarenessy bits, you know, that are not living in like a fantasy land. It's rich coming from me, maybe. You know, something we've discussed before is that I'm not black, I'm not American. But yeah, I think that sometimes it's off-putting to see certain media where then just someone's blackness just isn't acknowledged at all. In places where I'm like, I think people are thinking about this though, but it's fine, I guess we're in fantasy land and I guess we don't have to think about it. It is then a little bit of awkwardness in some ways, is that then when it is noted, you know that it's because it's going to be a thing to think about going forward. Similarly for a lot of roles where then just, as I say, you either live in a fantasy land where nobody cares about your race, your class, your sexuality, or it's mentioned, and so you know that the plot is going to be trying to make you think about it in the context of everything else. She meets her white boy cousin Oliver, who is your typical aristocrat from England, and then they kind of connect well enough that she's happy, that she's like, yeah, I'm glad that I reached out to this family member I found. He then says, you're invited, do you want to come to this wedding for our family? The plot kicks off. Off she flies to England and then meets the rest of her family on that side, who happen to be connected to 3 other powerful families? Or maybe they're the 3rd. Either way, it's a real old jamboree at this old country house, this Agatha Christie mansion that, it is the mansion from the beginning of the movie. Oh my goodness. A lot of her family and the other families seem really enthusiastic about meeting her, albeit with the odd bigotry-tinged comment. She gets on with the servers because obviously, like, those are then, like, the people she, like, relates to. She's a good girl. She's like, comrades, my fellow serving girls. But she is quickly seduced by the Lord of the Manor, a Walter De Ville. Anyway, the dream slowly becomes a nightmare as it creeps in, the twisted family secrets that have been hidden, and what strange connection these 3 families have to each other and to the De Ville. Who could this mysterious man be, really? It's Dracula. It's fucking Dracula. I am a big fan of a movie that it's a Dracula movie, but then they never say the name Dracula. I'm like, good for them. But obviously, I've got my criticisms about this whole movie. It wasn't necessarily obvious, but you know, I eagerly await the day where I'll just have nothing but good things to say about a movie. But it's not today. It's not today. This film is really obsessed with then the Dracula references, and I think I have a problem with it because the rest of the movie as a whole, as a generalization of the tone, it feels very YA romance. When I say about how she's seduced by the Lord of the Manor, it really does become like Dracula, Downton Abbey type. I don't know, it's weird. It means that there is then just this strange feeling that if you know Dracula, then you're picking up on all these references and you're like, so it's him, so that's Dracula. And if you don't know Dracula, then I imagine the movie moves really weirdly and slowly for you, because we then, instead of maybe full tension, just have this kind of hour where it feels like nothing's happening for Evie. As much as there are some good tense scenes, and scenes that support, yes, there's definitely horrific happenings here in case you forgot the scene right at the start, it doesn't merge well for me. And worse, it's the kind of thing where the parts that I do like just make the parts that then feel floppy comparatively a lot more stark, and then just bring the whole movie down a lot more for me. So scenes that I then liked was when she is then still talking to her friend Grace from home, and she's got her on call, and this is then one of those silly things that I'm just sat there being pedantic, like, there is no flipping way in hell that you've got signal in this old country house, like, don't lie to me. They don't even have a singular router in here. And in fact, they do make a point, I can't remember if it is explicit verbally, but they do make a point with the setting, which then I do have praise. I do have a lot of praise for the mise-en-scène and the costuming, but the point is that this guy does not like technology around his house. Even the lights that do work and have light switches are then very old, you know, the very kind of like start of electricity in people's homes type old. And so the idea that she's got perfect phone signal, my little pedantic brain firing off. But the scene that I liked for the tension and the scares, so I'm not a fan of jump scares and like false alarms and stuff, but it's when she's just like talking with her friend and her friend's still like cautious for her, a bird slams into the window. And it's the kind of thing where, I don't know, this is then very personal, that I will say that I do find kind of dead bird jump scares or birds slamming into windows to be quite an effective horror, because it tends to be that it's not just the jump scare of the loud bang, it is, why would a bird do that, you know? There's then like implications there of something more going on that's a bit less basic than just a bird slam jump scare. The other scene that I thought was effective as a scare for the tension was when the two obvious brides of Dracula, Lucy and Victoria, with a K, so saith the subs, so we know that she's like some kind of edgy. She's not some kind of edgy, she's just Eastern European, but yeah, when they take her out on a spa day, they then are doing their nails. Victoria's having like a skinny dip in the pool, like good for her. It's cute. They've got like rose petals. I like then the atmosphere that that brings, the luxury, the opulence. And then Lucy and Evie are having their nails done like intensively in a way that I'm a little weed, and I'm actually scared to have my nails done intensively, because the way that this scene plays out is how I imagine it in my head. You like all the metal tools that pinch and pull back and trim, that's going on, and there is a way that they have the sound effects be kind of squeaky and squealy and twitchy and creaky and all of the worst kind of sounds to then have while someone's having their nails done. And the inevitable happens when Victoria is being an absolute bee, and so she turns around too suddenly, Evie that is, and the manicurist cuts her nail. And I think because of the fact that this nail trimming has been going on for like a solid couple of minutes, I did enjoy the build up there. For me, the best scenes for jump scare, tension type things are then the ones where actually it's quite obvious what's gonna happen. It's something I think that I heard a Hitchcock quote about once, where there's a bomb under the table and the audience should know that the bomb is under the table, because that's then the tension creator.
4 people are sitting around a table, talking about baseball, whatever you like. 5 minutes of it, very dull. Suddenly, a bomb goes off, blows the people to smithereens. What do the audience have? 10 seconds of shock. Now take the same scene and tell the audience there is a bomb under that table, and will go off in 5 minutes. Well, the whole emotion of the audience is totally different, because you've given them that information. Now the conversation about baseball becomes very vital, because they're saying to you, don't be ridiculous, stop talking about baseball, there's a bomb under there. You've got the audience working.
And I feel like this scene with the nails and all of the pointedness towards the sound effects, I think that got that across, so that the scare was then kind of still eek, but also cathartic in a way. After that, we get a nice little scene of Victoria like, oh, let me see that, you know, in the not a vampire movie at this stage. What, vampires? Who said that? She takes her finger and sucks the blood. Evie is a semi-sensible girly as well. I think that it's after this that she goes and starts packing her bags. Like, she's done, she's out, forget it. Nice family that she met until she had to stay with them. On the other hand, we have, I think I said, false alarm type jump scares with the staff at the house. I did then feel quite hopeful when we first saw the staff, like right at the start when Evie arrives and gets her first introduction to this place and the way things are run, because the staff come out, there are 5 of them. I wouldn't know that because I wouldn't usually count, but their numbers are all printed on their aprons, and that kind of numbering of staff members, it just puts me in mind of branded cattle. And yeah, after the very first scenes of Evie in that position of being disrespected at the function, the connection is there. I like another thing that they do to connect Evie and the staff, like that's the side that they are on. She may be like thrust into this world of then the aristocracy and with, you know, a legitimate heirship or whatever you would call it. I don't know. I'm still waiting to be scooped up to go sit in a mansion and just become a class traitor, I guess, just for the heck of it. But Evie is then being called Evelyn by a lot of her family as her full name. She doesn't like it. She's like, please, Evie, please. And so when she ends up bumping into the staff and they smash some glasses or vases or whatever, they smash some things, she introduced herself like, hi, I'm Evie, and like, don't worry about it, it's my fault. And she then meets the two staff members, Imogen and Dia, but Dia then says, but please call me Dee. And I feel like it was a good little thread there, in my opinion, just to have that link where both of them are then not only really, you know, class kin, but also, yeah, I got that connection of like, but I would also like to, you know, go by this name. Unfortunately, I think it's Dee and Imogen that get got in. This is what I'm saying. I'm bringing up the scare scenes that did feel a bit pointless and almost adrift, dare I say. So this is early on when nothing really has been revealed. I just feel that they had to stick this in to remind everyone that they are watching a horror movie, in amongst all this kind of, as I say, Downton Abbey pomp and circumstance and, oh, I'm just an American girl, I don't want to be like with your stuffy values. It's not quite, you know, Emma Roberts' Wild Child, but definitely it's got that flavouring that the American is gonna be upsetting and shaking up the defined and established British aristocracy. But yes, sorry, the scares. So the head of the household, I think the old butler's name is Renfield. They pepper these references. He asks them to go get an 1897 bottle of wine. How do I remember it's 1897? Because it's another bloody Dracula reference. I would not remember it otherwise, I promise. And it's a scene where they really want to paint some tension, but I don't know, it just... That one seemed hammy and over the top. They ask, why do you need two of us to go down to the cellar to get one bottle of wine? They go down there, they get played with a little bit by one of the vampires. I think it's heavily implied later to be Victoria. And just, I don't know, this one did not work for me. As I say, just... It just really felt kind of corny and like also like an obligation that the film felt it needed. And it's, as I said earlier, something that I feel brings it down as a whole, a lot of these moments where then it doesn't dedicate itself fully to its strengths, where it kind of has that social messaging, as I say. Imagine the social messaging being a strength for your horror movie. But I mean it because it's a Dracula movie. And interestingly, I went to go watch a Dracula play the other day where the social messaging was also then, like, tacked on in that play. Not so much in this. I don't feel like it was tacked on in this. Interestingly, the two writers responsible for this are white women, but I do feel like something maybe happened after the casting of Natalie Emmanuel. Evie, but you probably would know her best as Missandei in Game of Thrones. That's gotta be her best known role. This is pure speculation, and I probably shouldn't be pure speculating on a big old video that's gonna go public and stuff, but, well, you know, that's me covering myself there for, I don't know, I'm just speculating from the information that I have right now, which is not then an intensive IMDb trivia scroll. I didn't look at the Wikipedia page before rabbiting, but I've already brought up a couple of these moments where then, like, they are like, yes, you're a black lady in a sea of white faces, cue the Get Out music. It's an interesting one for how it's brought in a way that then does end up ultimately feeling to the plot's credit, very integral to the narrative that she is then a working class black woman in an aristocratic setting where she belongs. They all say she belongs, but with all of these pepperings of just little bigoted comments that then really come out right at the end when it all kicks off at the kind of fake out wedding where she has then been manipulated to be the next bride of Dracula because he has been watching too much Charmed and needs the power of 3, or he's not that powerful. The lore is also very just, we need an explanation for why he's quite obsessed with them. They need Evie, like they need her bloodline. It's at the scene where she's trying to escape all of this, being Scream Queen, final girl, not in a diaphanous gown, but in the gown that she has been put in. And I'm gonna say again about the fact that the set and the costuming, very, very good. I watched a film last year that I think really then lowered my expectations for how well certain movies do once they move to a kind of English Edwardian estate. There's a lot that I am not actually experienced and educated enough to say. It's just a vibes thing, how costuming has really kind of decreased in quality over the last decade or so. It's totally to do with budget and time constraints. You just know it. I don't need to go look it up to actually know that that's what's going on. But yeah, The Invitation 2022, I think it gets it right. She has this dress that is on par with Cruella De Ville in Disney's Cruella movie. It's red, it's got all these like feathers and stuff. It looks great and it makes her look like powerful and stuff. So when she's on the run and she's fighting for her life trying to get out, we get a few more cheeky, bigoted, racist comments chucked her way. Someone calls her a halfling. Someone's like, I thought from the beginning that you were beneath us, and it is just said in that way with all of the outer context that you know what he's saying, you know what he means. I did see, logging this onto Letterboxd, someone had left the review, Meghan Markle the biopic. And that was funny, but this is no fun zone. And as I say, how dare you? Evie is a comrade. Evie is a working class girl. She is on the side of the proletariat. Back to my point about the way that this works in a Dracula movie, that the vampire genre tends to have a kind of resurgence every time that there is a great wealth disparity in society, because a lot of academics agree that vampires at their core, think of them, they often come from old blood, if you'll excuse the term, old money, and their aristocracy. They are then a projection of society's fears when the bourgeoisie is preying on the proletariat, you know? I think this ties well with Evie and her as a Black American character, because race and class are obviously intertwined in that way that, yeah, it brings to mind these questions. She's only got one friend in the whole world, is how it feels. She's a good friend. I'm sure she has more friends, but Grace is her main that she keeps in contact with on this whole trip. And the thing about class and race, and then the setting of, I keep using Agatha Christie mansion because it's the best thing I can think of, because when I praise the setting, I think that this does fall a little, it's not, we don't get to see as many rooms to really give it that grandiose gothic opulence. It's still awesome, it's still great, but for me, I was mostly put in mind of Agatha Christie. Still good, still great. And then with that in mind, it's that question of these houses, they never call the police. They don't have to. The police are on their side. How much do the police care if you've gone missing? For Evie, you've got to question it because of her position in society as freelance artist, caterer, Black American in New York. And that's why it's a really effective twist on the tale, I think. It's a shame that it arguably doesn't always fully commit to that and veers off in this YA romance direction. The difficulty as well with knowing, if you know Dracula, that it's a bloody Dracula adaptation because of all these references peppered everywhere. They do wait right until the end to get in that Jonathan and Mina Harker sell her out when she's on the run, because when she does manage to escape, she gets caught again. But yeah, it's a shame they don't commit to it. It makes the whole thing at worst feel a bit floppy because I said earlier, either you know Dracula and so you know where this is going, or you don't and are maybe bored by what seems to be a straight-played romance, and the idea that then the sham wedding she's been invited to is her own wedding, and that's then the twist. I did like the bombast in the reveal of the twist that wasn't a twist for me and anyone else familiar with Dracula, surely. But yeah, for me, at worst, there were just so many scenes that dragged because it's Dracula. I'm sat there from the get-go going, well, that's Dracula then. There's all these statues and all of these bloody references constantly. The writers really patting themselves on the back. And I wouldn't be so bitchy about it. Except for the exhaustion I felt watching these straight-played romance scenes. I do want to credit the way that the lead actress does have a lot of charisma to carry this. Their first kiss that they have, fireworks are going on outside, and when she mentions that it's such a cliche, there are so many actors that I don't think could pull that off. I think that I would then be rolling my eyes. It would be giving that, that Marvel, Disney, Star Wars humor of, we're the writers and we know you read Reddit. Oh, we're breaking the fourth wall. Oh, pat us on the head. Like, no, shut up, get out of here. But I think that Emmanuel really carried that off in a way that I was charmed by her. I think that, yeah, she then carried a lot of the film for me. There's a whole haunting with then her grandmother, Evelyn? No, Emmeline, yes. There's a whole haunting with her grandmother, Emmeline, the woman who hanged herself at the beginning of the movie, where we spot her ghost a couple of times, and it feels kind of Crimson Peak, you know? The ghost is a horror, but she is also trying to protect and guide Evie. It just goes away as a thing that's happening as soon as the plot can't be bothered to write it in anymore. I don't know. Disappointing! Through these moments that, you know, because I brought up earlier the Hitchcock paraphrase quote that I don't fully remember about knowing the bomb is under the table, but the film wasn't treating it like that, and so it just felt boring and sappy, and unfortunately I don't think that they had chemistry. The whole thing with what she was then saying to Grace in confidence on their calls, it felt to her like a fun, saucy summer romance, just pure animal instinct. I fancy him. We're gonna have sex at some point. That's cool. That's fine with me. Yeah, it makes most sense to me. But instead, they really start to paint it like it's gonna be this like great relationship and he's such a great guy and stuff. And it was annoying. It was boring. However, more praise for where they took the social messaging aspect of it. I like that with the lore dump that we got that was whatever. We also found out that the thing about becoming one of Dracula's brides is that he will transfer his blood to you first and you will gain all of his powers until he dies. And so Evie cunningly uses this to her advantage. She takes his blood, messes them all up, saves the one surviving staff member, and happy ending. But I really enjoyed the way that, first of all, the brides that came after, Lucy and Victoria, when they were fighting each other, it's something that a lot of adaptations gloss over a little bit. The brides of Dracula, they're never then really treated as a big threat, I feel. There are obviously exceptions to this, and I can think of a couple, but fighting each other at the end, at that runtime of the movie, I thought that they would just get backhanded into irrelevance. But no, they had some focus that I thought was good and sufficient. I was satisfied. But the thing I want to talk about is that there's a lot of media, especially in YA books, which this movie was starting to give the vibes of, where when the heroine loses her powers, it feels quite misogynistic. It feels crap. It feels like the most dissatisfying ending to wrap things up, to get everyone back in the lines of the social order. The adventure and the chaos of the adventure and those exceptional circumstances is over. Get back in the kitchen. But with the invitation and the angle it took, it did feel to me like it did a very good job building up the ideas of vampirism and Dracula's whole empire and all the power of these families being something that was tainted and poisoned inherently. Just generations of patriarchy and exploitation, and all the way that this old money is blood-soaked. And so when Evie knowingly puts herself in a position where she will lose that power, it feels then it's her choice, and her choice is to reject that. She may be related to that legacy, but she's not going to carry on that legacy. And I like the wrap-up that we get at the end, where we get to see her and her friend Grace hunting down the last remnants of this empire together. And it's silly, it's got some puns going on from her friend, who is so good, by the way. She's not a show stealer. It's not a tragedy every time she's not in a scene, but when she is in a scene, I believe in their friendship. She says a lot of things that make them feel like they've lived a life together, that they've cried and they've fought, and yeah, I believed in their friendship a lot, which is great. Considering that she wasn't in the movie an awful lot, she still felt like she had a lot of presence. This ending as well did wrap up in a way that felt like part of that trope that I don't always like, because I think it's cheeky. The trope is the idea that stuffy old England is all stuffy and it is all part of then a system that has been, you know, the empire, the system of exploitation and that whole like blood-soaked legacy of empire. But then in comes the American, new and fresh, with new ideas, we the people. It's that reason that I think that it's cheeky, is because at worst I think that that trope, whilst often very fun every time, I think that it can then cheekily sidestep America's legacy of genocide and slavery. But no, in this, because of how it all links together, I think that it does a good job of then out with the old, in with the new, which is then also a line that Evie literally says, because she's had a haircut, she's got an outfit change going on that Grace comments on, saying that she likes it. And it gives us that excuse for her to say that line and cement that thing at the end of the movie as a message. I think overall I shall be giving this film 3 Brides of Dracula out of 5, because when I was having fun with the movie, I was having so much fun. I loved parts of the vision and its potential. I just don't think I'd want to rewatch it, and the parts that disappointed me and bored me made me cross. But I hope you'll join me for day 14, where we will be looking into a dark, twisted, psychological thriller from 1960. See you then.